It's always terrible when I set one of these up and I'm just talking to myself. So, thank you all for coming. I mean, it's really nice outside, so you obviously don't have anything better to do than come and listen to me talk. So, you're probably wondering who I am first. So, my name is Patrick. I am the director and lead chiropractor here at Complete Health. And I always like to just make sure I'm at the right talk before I start talking. So have I got it right? I'm at how to naturally manage ADHD and autism without the use of drugs and surgery. Cool, I'm at the right talk. Good. So, how many people in the room struggle with neurodivergent conditions themselves? How many people have a family member? How many people, no matter what I say, are not going to let me know? Cool. So, is it fair to say that neurodivergent behaviour is essentially becoming more identified and probably more aware of now more than ever?
Yeah.
And that possibly the frequency in which it is occurring is potentially going up. There's a couple of statistics on this actually. I want to say that, if I remember this correctly, autism is a 20-fold increase and ADHD is pretty much the same. We're now diagnosing roughly 5% of kids with ADHD, and roughly it's just below 2%, I think it's 1.7% of kids with autism. I think it's about 32% of kids that are diagnosed with ADHD or autism are also diagnosed with the counteracting diagnosis. So if you've got ADHD, quite often you're diagnosed with autism. If you're autistic, 32% are diagnosed with ADHD. So the question is it's wrong. And so I guess people probably are asking the question, why is a chiropractor talking about this? Does anybody actually know what a chiropractor is or does or does? Anybody have any ideas?
They like align the spine to help other parts.
Yeah.
To make us feel
Something like
better. To make us feel better.
Yeah. So does anybody know how long a chiropractor studies for? Yeah, it's a long time. So it's 5 years. 5 years I had to do 3 years as a bachelor's of human science, understanding how the body works, and then I had to do a 2 years master's in chiropractic, understanding how we can make it work better. Does anybody actually know what the primary focus of chiropractic care actually is? What we focus on? Because everyone gets this wrong. Because everybody thinks they know what we work on. Because what do the videos show you online?
Shows your spine.
Crack that. Move that bone. What sits inside of your spine?
The nerves.
Yeah. And what's that connected to? What's the problem with neurodivergent kids? Yeah, they don't have a brain. So, what I really want to focus on is the brain. All right, this is pretty much the chiropractor's secret to everything that's basically going on with the body, right? And this is why I believe I've got some level of expertise talking about this, because one of the things that we spend most of our time talking about or studying at school is, guess what? The brain. Now, obviously, most people think that we focus on the 24 moving vertebrae in your spine, but why might that be important? Because, like I say, this is the direct message to your brain. Cool. So, is it okay, because I'm going to get a few ground rules in, I will talk fast, is that okay? Yeah. I will move a lot, is that okay?
Yeah.
Because guess what, I'm probably as ADHD as most of the kids that I'm seeing. I'm also probably a bigger kid than most of the kids that I'm seeing. There's something else I will do a lot, which is ask questions. Is that okay? Now there's a primary number one reason, especially in a room of potential neurodivergent people, why I will ask questions. Why do you think that is? To make sure you haven't fallen asleep. Because guess what? We learn a lot more when we're awake than when we're asleep. Okay? So, I think really to understand dysfunction of the body, because is it fair to say that potentially some of our kids and maybe even some of ourselves, we can be a bit dysfunctioning at times?
At times.
Is it best to understand what function is first before we understand what dysfunction is? So if I ask people what the actual definition of health is, what would we define it as?
What you're taught to think it is.
Yeah, what's that?
Is it like a holistic view of everything that goes on in the body?
Yeah, absolutely. So what does that mean?
I have no idea.
What do we think health means? Yeah, don't go by what everybody else has told you. What do you think it means?
A working body that's
Working
ill.
body? Yeah, not ill. Yeah. Anything else?
Working as it should.
Working as it should. Anything else? No pain. It's a good one. By the way, how many people have kids that actually have pain as well? Yeah, that's not uncommon, by the way. Now they don't feel that's probably another problem, right? So, another sign of dysregulation. So the definition of health that has been set out by the World Health Organization is complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of disease. So if we don't have pain, does that mean that we're healthy?
No.
So how many people remember during COVID or just after COVID when people started going back to football pitches and watching the football, how many people having heart attacks in the stadiums? Or even football players having heart attacks in the stadium?
Well, there's loads, wasn't there?
Right, and the reality is were those people actually healthy the day before they had those heart attacks?
No.
Possibly not. So the question is then how do we actually start measuring these things? What can we do to measure people's health and function? Yeah.
Body, like height, body, weight, and
Yeah, we can look at stuff like people's weight, because at the end of the day, obviously we're the wrong heights and weights for our size. That can have an impact on our health. Is there anything else?
Tests.
Diet.
Tests.
Right, we can have a look at questionnaire on diet. What was it you said?
Blood tests.
Blood tests. So we can have a look at what people's markers are. By the way, with neurodivergent kids, how many of these work?
0.
0. So with neurodivergent kids, what do we typically test? Not a lot. You watch kids, you watch how they say. We might do things like questionnaires, we might have a look at a couple of different tests, their attention span, etc. But I think, like someone already said earlier, we have to be holistic in the way that we approach this, because there are so many factors in the way that our brain works and develops. There are so many different factors that can then be applied to actually then help reverse some of the, and I am going to say this, the symptoms of ADHD. So when we start looking at the function of our brain and nervous system, our brain and nervous system basically is designed to do 3 main controlled things. Does anybody really know what the 3 main controlled functions of our body actually are?
Keeping us alive.
Yeah, well, it does do that. Anybody know what they do? I do a lot of it.
movement,
Yeah, so it controls movement. What else does it control?
sensory.
Sensory, which is ironically another one that we see a lot with ADHD and autism. And your organs, so you're also not going to control. So, like you're saying, it keeps you alive, right? Now, essentially, our nervous system is designed to regulate. Is that fair to say? What happens when it doesn't regulate properly? You guys are maybe learning this the hard way. Turns into all sorts of different.
My house.
Yeah. So I have a very solid reason why I became a chiropractor, and it's because not personally for my own health that I had something come up, but I actually had something happen in my family that made me start asking the question as to what our health services were doing, right? So in this picture, there is a health complaint in this picture, right? And I just wonder whether anybody can see it.
There's a what in there? What did you say?
There's a health complaint. There's something or someone in this picture that has something wrong. The reason why I love showing this is because you can't see it, but
Is it mental health?
no,
Weight?
no.
How many guesses do we get?
As many as you want as I go around.
Did you do drinking?
No.
Is it why we're here?
No.
Is it back?
No. So, like I say, no one ever gets it. So, someone in this picture's got a terminal disease. Can you see it?
No.
No. Sucks, right? So, I always say, so I was in this picture. Most people don't identify me because, as you can see, I've got a lot more beard and a lot less hair. I always say I sneezed and it fell from my head onto my face. But this was me. This was my mum. My mum had a bowel tumour. She died when she was 48. Now, my sole purpose of running a practice now is if I can help people get away from the things that essentially trigger disease and dysfunction in the body and actually help people to live slightly more normal lives. Now, someone actually said this to me this week. I've had so many, because obviously our clients in the practice see my adverts and saw that I was doing this talk and they said, "Oh, Patrick, you're so brave. You're so brave doing this talk." The reality is if I could potentially help 2 kids, have I done my job? Yeah. If I help 1 kid, have I done my job? So the reality is you guys can gun me down if you want later, which is fine. I'm stood here to try and help. But if you want to gun me down, I'm willing to take the shot if I can help 1 kid.
Do you know what? It's not even about helping that 1 kid, it's actually about educating all of us.
Hallelujah. Thank you, someone's on my side.
Thank
you, thank you for
Sorry,
backing
no, we'll be ready, we'll be ready. Yeah, we're ready.
You're right, aren't you? Like, we all know other people with other kids like it. Yeah. And we all attract neurospicy.
Yeah.
Oh, trust me, I'm neurospicy. So we've got quite a few now that and this is one of the reasons why I was willing to put this talk on is that I think I was talking to you earlier, is we've had a few neurodivergent kids coming through the practice and we're just starting to see some really cool results starting to happen with these kids. So Zachary is probably my gold star that I've been working with. Actually, funny enough, he was a neighbour for one of our reception staff who said to his mum, "Why don't you bring him in, because he had headaches?" And Zach is both ADHD and autistic. He is absolutely hilarious. His mum never thought he was going to get on with me. Interestingly enough, Zach he's very clever. He managed to coax me into taking him out in my car. When I bought a new sports car, he managed to hoax me out into taking that. But not only is Zach's headaches started to reduce, his attention span has started to improve, the number of freakouts that he's starting to have reduced, and he's no longer hitting his head against the wall. Does that sound quite cool?
What age to take them from?
Yeah, he's he's 7. The youngest child I've ever worked with is 2 weeks old.
Oh wow. So you would take my 3-year-old?
Wow. So is that to do with anxiety though, or?
What do you reckon?
Well, I do, but obviously you're the expert.
Yeah. So I think it's to do with the dysregulated nervous system, right? So when we look at what triggers changes in our neurological system, now there's quite a lot of research on this, and I'm probably going to say something that's can sometimes instill a lot of emotion into people, is that typically most neural development issues are due to inflammation. Good, cool, no one shot me. So when we look at a developing brain, do you think it's going to want inflammation? Do you think in society nowadays, maybe we've got a few more stresses in our lives than what maybe we had like 50, 60, maybe 70 years ago?
And I don't believe they're getting the right information either.
Agree. Yeah, with you on that one.
So there are typically 3 types of stress that we'll typically see start to affect someone's neurological system. Now, by the way, this is not just true for kids, this is true for adults too. There are 3 different types of stress that we'll start to see affect our nervous system. Can anybody have a guess what they might be? Trauma.
Socialising.
So emotional. So we've got physical trauma, we've got emotional trauma, and there's one other one.
Maybe environmental.
Yeah, so what in the environment might cause damage to us? Because we already talked about your environment could cause physical trauma because you could fall over and do stuff.
Yeah, that would be like emotional, wouldn't it?
What's that?
Other people.
Other people would be emotional, yeah.
Yeah. Would it be like food, like learning, do you know what I mean? Like
Again, that
education.
could, so that could be back into like psychological, emotional stuff.
Like the
Has
food that you eat.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got toxins, so things that we put into the body. So we, in chiropractic, we call them 3 T's. We call them thoughts, toxicity, trauma. Thoughts, toxicity, trauma. Now all of these things will start to change the way that our body starts to work. Has anybody ever had a fall before?
Yeah.
And if you said no, you're lying. Because the average child, if any of you have got children in the room, which I assume a lot of you do, the average child's had about 1,000 falls before the age of 7. 200 of them are considered enough to cause tissue damage. How many people in the room had babies via C-section? Okay. How many people had to have an epidural? Okay. What ones have we got? How many people had breech babies? Yeah. How many people had complicated birthing processes? Yeah. What ones have we got? How many people were overly emotionally stressed before the baby was born? So you'll notice like good job, bro. you were brave putting your hand up there. The point is does anybody think any of that stuff would have an impact on a child?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've started to know, or one of the things that I see most commonly with kids that I'm ever going to see that are young, that got brought into me into practice, where do you think I probably find most of their issues?
In the
At the top. Why? Because most of the damn things have been yanked out by the frickin' ears. Now, what we know about changes in function of the spine. Now, this is where I think things get quite juicy. Is that when we see change in function of the spine, we start to see change in function of the brain. Okay, and there are different things that we have started to see in the research that can help with regulation of brain function and inflammation, and there are things that we can do that absolutely do not help with brain function and regulation. So, can I just ask, how many people in the room have fussy eater kids? Oh shit. Yeah. So, how many people struggle to get like whole foods and proteins and stuff like that into their kids? Yeah, it's a challenge, right? So, and this can be one of the sources of why kids are not regulating, because at the end of the day, what is food? It's our fuel, right? It's what we use to repair, it's what we use to regulate, it's how we actually allow our tissues to recuperate. So nutritionally, what do you think kids that are maybe overinflamed are probably going to be most gravitated towards?
Sugar, yeah.
What sends them off the rails?
Sugar.
Right. So in my experience, autistic ADHD kids, they are typically most gravitated to what types of food? Beige. Guys, I'm telling you stuff that you already know, right? The reality is that that food is consistent and it doesn't change in taste and flavour. However, like if you can't get them in the whole foods, it may well be worth looking at other ways that you can get those supplements or nutrients into kids. So what do you reckon they get from the non-beige foods that they might be needing? Vitamins. What is a vitamin, by the way? Does anybody know what a vitamin is? The other name for a vitamin is? Antioxidant, right? So when we talk about vitamins, they're antioxidants, right? Does anybody know what oxidization is?
Yes.
So if you cut open an apple, what happens to the colour of the apple? What colour does it go? What is that process called? Oxidization, right? Is that apple in the same state when we cut it open 15 minutes later to when we first cut it open? No, something changes, right? So that tissue, it's an apple, but that tissue, it's a live or was a live or can become a live organism. That tissue starts to degenerate and decompose as soon as you cut it open, quicker, because all of a sudden bacteria, things are allowed to then react with that, and that process then allows that tissue to then start breaking down. Does that make sense? Now guess what happens in the body when we don't put antioxidants in? So very much in the same way that we see oxidization happening on bikes or apples, guess what happens inside of your body? Same thing. So if we're lacking certain, if we're lacking, and this is, and by the way, I'm probably not telling you guys anything you don't know. Trying to get food into these kids is going to be hard work, right? You're going to deal with temper tantrums. You're going to deal with it because the reality is it better for them? I know I'm telling you something you probably don't want to hear. What about, has anybody ever heard of omega-3?
Yeah.
Okay, what does omega-3 do? Does anybody ever know? It does help with brain function. Okay, this is one of probably the most clinically researched supplements that we know about. What do you think its best effect on the body is?
Supplements?
Best effects.
Concentration?
What is it actually changing in the body? Might be an easier way of saying it.
Your mobility and stuff.
Not quite. Well, it might have by an indirect effect.
Inflammation.
What do we want to reduce? By the way, this is the truth. This is the reason why I can do this talk, like I can do any other talk, because the principles of all disease are pretty much come down to the same dysfunctions. Is inflammation. So one of the things that we have found with omega-3 is that omega-3, when we're born, omega-3 in our body versus omega-6 is in roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. By the age of 20, what do you reckon the ratio is?
My brain switched off. I don't know what you said.
2 to 0.
I'm really sorry.
That's right. It's about 20 to 1. Right?
What? Hang on, I missed.
Okay.
I completely missed.
That's fine. So omega-3 it's an essential fatty acid.
Yeah.
Okay. The purpose of omega-3 is it reduces inflammation in the body.
Yeah.
That's its primary purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. So on a neurodeveloping brain, especially children, because what is their brain doing at a rapid pace? It's growing. Right. So it's developing. If we're lacking the essential fatty acids that our brain needs to develop, and it's inflamed, what's going to happen to that kid's brain?
It's not going to develop properly.
So in this country, when we are first born, we're born with a ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. Omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. That's the reason why I use that as a reference point. Omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. The ratio is 1-to-1 when we're born. By the age of 20, we're 20 to 1 in this country. Why do you think that is?
That's our diet.
Because we're not
The nutrition, right?
Finish.
So the reality is like the thing is we know this stuff. This stuff is, by the way, you can go on ChatGPT. You can Google this stuff if you want to go and check it. Like this stuff is on the internet. It's not, I'm not pulling things out of the air. This is, I've had my own omega-3 test. Do you want to guess what my ratio was? It was bad.
I don't have any omega-3 in my diet.
Yeah.
None.
My omega-3 ratio when I first tested for omega-3, because there are blood tests out there that you can do for this, mine was 48 to 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
I reckon I'm
Bad, right? Now the reality is, the reason why I didn't have any symptoms is because it wasn't affecting my joint function, but guess what part of my body it was affecting? Which, as a brain-based chiropractor, how do you think I felt? Pretty freaking damn stupid, right? So the reality is we know that we can obviously start to change the brain through nutrition. Other things that we also know that help with development of tissue is proteins. What are proteins designed to do? They're building blocks, right? They're literally there to develop our brain. So if we've got things that we're lacking, e.g. stuff like omega-3s, our vitamins, our antioxidants. Now there's a couple that really do seem to work well. Thiamine being one, folate being another, which is a B vitamin, and then omega-3. These are ones that we actually kind of see, and magnesium in children with ADHD and autism tends to help with focus, muscle pains, cramps, stuff like that.
Doesn't magnesium help with dehydration as well?
It can do also. One thing you've got to be a little bit careful with, if you've got kids with irritable stomachs, magnesium in higher doses can...
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you've got kids with sensitive stomachs, you have to be a little bit careful with magnesium because there is a gut and bowel tolerance.
Yeah.
So the adult doses that you see on those packets, you need to try and find ones that are kind of suitable for kids. Now, the other question is what are we potentially putting into the body that then is driving up inflammation? So if we look at things from a food perspective, what kinds of things are people driving in that might be increasing inflammation? Additives, processed foods, sugar, flour. So all the things that unfortunately most people really, really like. Vegetable oils are horrific. Yeah, most processed oils are horrific for joint pain, brain function, just our general health and well-being.
Isn't there links between neurospicy people and gut issues?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Because does anybody know where 98% of serotonin is produced?
In the gut.
It's in the gut.
Yeah.
So the hormone that's supposed to make you feel good, guess where it's produced? Yeah. So it's in the gut. So if we've got an unhappy gut, how do you think that starts to affect people's mood?
I've got a really
So we obviously established that there's obviously loads of chemical ways that we can start to affect the body. It's not even just our food. There's obviously things like, you know, our household products, our aerosols, the combustants that are out on the road. Now, obviously you guys can't have an impact on those kinds of things because they're around us. But it's just having that awareness of knowing those things that are starting to have an influence. Physically, we already spoke about a couple of things. What kinds of things that physically could have happened to kids that could be affecting the way that their brains are developing? Spoke about a couple already. Yanking their heads out, affecting their upper cervical spine. Falls, bumps, bruises, fighting, scratching, pulling. Yeah. And like I say, average kid, about 1,000 falls before the age of 7.
My son broke his arm 2 years ago, for example. That can have
Is
an
it a trauma?
impact.
Yeah.
My son broke his ankle and it was broken for 2 weeks before
Well,
he
you
even told me it was
noticed
in pain.
Yeah. Well, we were saying this earlier. Dysregulated kids they're not always aware of stuff.
I don't feel pain.
Normally.
Cracked his head open and it comes
Temperature,
out every minute.
Sound, or they're oversensitive. They can be under or oversensitive.
That's Olivia.
She's like, but my child will be oversensitive for the minor things, but won't care about the big things.
Yeah.
That's what, yeah.
So there are other things that obviously, and again, this is typically one of the most controversial things I ever say, is medication growing up. Does anybody know the percentage increase on medication used in kids? Yeah.
Really crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, astronomical. And same again with, and this is in America, so the statistic for kids with vaccines now is, I think it's 14 vaccines before they attend school.
Is that because there's no investment in like trying to support the kids way before they go to school, like with their mental health
No
and
idea.
regulation?
I
In this country, I don't think there is
I'm not
particularly.
on the boards for those kinds of people,
Yeah.
so I can't tell you why.
But I mean, people that are just going for it now, waiting for diagnosis, is like it could take 5 years.
And one of the issues that we have with medication, does anybody know how they work out whether they give kids to, or kids? So with pharmaceutical companies, when we look at medication for kids, do you know how they work it out?
Don't they give them 30 milligrams and go, oh, well that works,
Yeah.
or no,
So
it
they
didn't.
basically take an adult dose and then they just make it a bit smaller because they're
Yeah,
smaller
they do it
people.
on a weight and stuff like that, don't they? Yeah.
Now the reality is, our kids, we've already established, right? Kids' brains are developing at different paces, their bodies are developing at different paces, their bodies work in different ways, right? So to treat them like little people is not always the way to go, right? So the reality is that some of these kids are getting toxicity built up in their system. And does anybody know, because by the way, I want to solidly clarify this, I'm not anti-vaccine, but does anybody know of some of the side effects of vaccines as well? So when we look at vaccines, there are 2 substances in vaccines that we know are neurotoxic. Does anybody know what they are? Mercury and aluminium. So what we know is that with aluminium and mercury high exposure, we're not supposed to eat more than 3 large portions of large fish per week. Does anybody know why?
Because of the mercury.
Because of mercury, right? So mercury, increased consumption of mercury, and they've also said this about aluminium pots. So they stopped selling aluminium pots in supermarkets. Does anybody know why?
Because
It was linked to dementia and Alzheimer's in developing brains. Oh, shit.
Isn't there something the same with lead or something?
Yeah, same again with lead. Yeah, that's the other one. So again, in countries, this happened in America, where there was a lot of lead build up in the pipe system, in the plumbing. Guess what? They saw a sudden spike of what conditioning in children? ADHD and autism. So what we know is that there's a lot of things that can be affecting the developing brain. Now, when we obviously put toxins into the body and the brain starts to inflame, guess what happens to their development? It slows down. So there's a few people that have obviously started looking at ways that we can actually manage this. Obviously I've already discussed some of those, so we've looked at stuff like nutrition. Really simple. Can everybody manage to potentially squeeze an omega-3 supplement down their child's throat?
Do you know, you're bringing back so many memories of my mum doing it to me as a kid.
Yeah. Could everyone manage to potentially, could everyone manage to potentially get like a couple of sources of protein into their kids' meals? No.
He's orphaned, so definitely not.
Just stuff it down there. Just open it up like a bin and just push it in. Could we potentially make sure that our kids are more hydrated? Cool. Could we potentially make sure that we run them around the park and make sure we burn them out as much as possible?
That's one of the systems.
So there's tons of ways that we can start to get into these things. Now, obviously, there are going to be certain kids where this is not going to work. Okay. So what we then have to look at is, you know, what is our role as far as therapy, and what have we started to see change in kids' brains when we start looking at trauma. So if you forget the name of his podcast. His name is Tony Ebel. If you want to listen to the guru of chiropractors on EPEL, Tony Ebel. He's American. He is in Chicago, I believe. I actually met him last year. The guy's an absolute legend. They're predominantly paediatric practice. So essentially what I mean by that is they predominantly see kids in their practice. And guess what condition they see most? ADHD and autism. Alright. And so what we've started to learn is with kids with dysregulation mentally, guess what? You start to see dysregulation physically. So you start to see changes. Now, how many people have got kids that are clumsy?
Yeah.
So what is clumsiness a sign of? Yeah.
A lot of people I know that have got ADHD have got hypermobility as
Yeah.
well. So it goes like,
Yeah. As by the way, like all conditions on the spectrum, by the way, in my experience, have links with other conditions.
I've just started like doing my own research and touch diving on different things.
Because what we do with conditions is we categorise and label them based on symptoms. So the question is there something wrong with our kids, or are our kids starting to not be able to regulate properly? So let me ask the question, right? If I force-fed you cream cakes every day for the next 6 months, what would happen to your waistline?
intolerance.
Oh, don't do that. Yeah, so yours might go down. It might decrease. Yeah. But the reality of it, so you're a bad example. But the reality is, if we did that to someone, right, we know that their body would adapt to that change, right? So, and the reality was that a problem with the body, or was that a problem with the environment that we put into the body? Does that make sense? So the reality is there's a lot of things that we're seeing start to happen. Now when we start to see changes in regulation, what we start to see is changes in stuff like muscle tone. We start to see changes in the way that our brain can then start to communicate to our body. So when we were looking at things earlier, and when we look at stress on the body, essentially what we start to see is changes in the way that our autonomic system starts to work. So it affects the way that our heart starts to work, it affects the way that our breathing starts to work, it affects the way that our digestion starts to work, it affects the way that our hormones start to work, it affects the way that our immune system starts to work. And again, we can prove this. We only have to look back at physiology textbooks, all right? So has anybody ever heard of the fight and flight response?
Yeah.
And how many of your kids are having fight and flight responses on a regular basis?
Like every minute of the day.
Yeah, right. So does anybody want to see what happens? Anybody want to see what happens with physiology in a fight and flight response? So hypothetically speaking, this is Andrew's favourite thing when I talk about this. Hypothetically speaking, Drusilla's have a tiger in their zoo, and somehow it's managed to make its way down the A27, and it's seen this office and gone, there's a lot of people in there, so that sorts lunch out. So it busts through the window and decides that it's going to start taking its pickings. What happens to everyone's heart rate in the room?
You get a spike.
Yeah. What happens
Oh,
to
don't
everyone?
take me.
It's easier than dealing with life. What happens to everyone's breathing rate in the room?
Rapid.
What happens to digestion? What happens to immune function? Slows down. Slows down. What happens to muscle tone?
Does it increase?
It's ready for fighting or flight.
Tenses, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Hormonal regulation is going to change. Blood flow is going to change. Our blood flow actually comes away from our vital organs and goes towards our arms and legs. Why? Because we want to run away. What happens to people's cholesterol level? Goes up.
Right, yeah.
Why? Because it thickens our blood. It stops us from bleeding out. So with kids with trauma and very easily spiked, how often do you think they go through this process?
I don't even imagine
A lot.
my kids are in and out of it all the time.
Now, one of the things that has anybody ever heard of Stephen Porges? Stephen Porges wrote about polyvagal theory. Has anybody ever heard of polyvagal theory? Does anybody know what vagus nerve is?
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So if you imagine you're driving a car, right, and we're talking about sympathetics, so fight and flight. Sympathetics is your accelerator. Really going to go for it, getting away from the tiger. Your vagus nerve is, guess what? Brake. Slows everything down. Now, interestingly enough, you can actually, I don't know whether can you guys see this chart from over there? So angled a bit of a weird way. Can you guys see that over there?
Yeah.
Or do I just hold it up like this? It's easier. Can you see this? So we have two sets of nerves, right? We have yellows. This is our stress response. When you start looking at people with stress responses on a regular basis, guess where I find all the tone in their spine? So when I feel through their spine, guess where it feels the most stuck? Guess where they want all their attention? The reason why, what are the green nerves? These are our parasympathetic nerves. Guess what these nerves control? They turn everything off, right? So guess what they do to your heart rate? Slow it down. Guess what they do to your breathing rate? Guess what it does to your immune system? Gets it working. Gets it working. Guess what it does to our cholesterol levels? Yeah. Guess what it does to your freakouts and meltdowns? Slows them down. So this, essentially, when I first started working with Zach, guess where I found most of his problems?
Lower.
Lower and
Higher.
height. Inside his mouth, around his jaw, around his head, around his neck, probably about as far as halfway down the
Because
neck.
that's where you would find, like, in a stressed person, the most tense.
Tension,
Yeah.
around the neck and shoulders, especially in females. I hate to say this, but females definitely struggle way more with headaches, and males tend to struggle way more with lower back issues. So when we start actually then addressing these kinds of things, what we can start to see is reduced inflammation in someone's body. So if someone's immune system is working better, most people just assume that their immune system just focuses on fighting infections. Does anybody else know what it does? Regulates and repairs tissue, reduces inflammation, and manages function. Again, same again with obviously with heightened stress and cholesterol levels, and what's going to happen to stuff like their blood pressure and breathing rate and function. Again, same again if they've got high tone in the muscles, guess what starts to happen to their coordination, their balance? It goes all over the place. It's great fun. And I love working with this, as you can probably tell.
Giant puzzle.
It is a huge puzzle. Now, I guess the next question is how do we actually measure functional people? So we use, I don't know, have we got any of them up here? Should we come up there? Cool. So I can do this with kids as well, obviously depending on age, but you will start to see a couple of changes in the way that people present. So if someone's got a stressed system, what do you think starts happening to their posture? Do you think it looks good or do you think it looks bad? Yeah. You want to have a look at some of these? So these are some of the things that these are some of the things that we measure in the practice. So we can actually measure people's posture inside the practice, and you can do this with kids, right? And you can actually start to have a look at how their brain is regulating their system. If someone's regulating well, what we would expect them to be is upright, right? It means that their brain can understand what's going on with their body. So if their brain can regulate, it should be able to control not only all of this stuff, it should be able to actually control all of this stuff, because we said that the brain controls 3 things: movement, senses, and autonomic function, our organs, etc. Polyvagal theory basically looks at the process of obviously how our brain can receive information through stuff like our cranial nerves. With autism, what's one of their primary things that they struggle with? Social communication, right? Being able to read what's going on in front of them. That is a sensory input into our brain that the brain is not being able to interpret. Does that make sense? If we can start to get the brain to organise and the spine to organise with the brain, and the two of them to communicate so that they can start to see things, we can start to see improvements in the way that they can start to communicate. We can start to see ways, improvement in their stuff like their coordination. Like I say, in Zachary's case, they didn't actually bring him in to see me for regulation. They came in to see me for headaches. It just so happened to be that the side effect was that, guess what, he started regulating better. Like I say, we added a couple of supplements to his diet, namely omega-3, thiamine and magnesium, and guess what, he's calming. In fact, actually, I said to Emma, which is his mum, I was like, what have you done to Zachary? She was like, what do you know what I've done to Zachary? He just started taking, and we've just been using the supplements he recommended the last 6 weeks. I was like, oh. He's a completely different kid. He used to come in and argue with me about whether we were going to do an arm wrestle at the beginning of the session, and now he just sits in the corner and waits for his adjustment whilst Mum's getting adjusted, which is, by the way, I said it's a lot easier.
Quick question.
Yeah, fire away.
My eldest daughter, she is in this constant state of, I don't know how to explain it. It's always, everything's a fight. Like, whether it's her attitude, just the way she responds to everything. Where would you start? By giving her the omega-3? Because I would say I feed my kids a relatively good diet. They don't have processed foods really. It's not. So I wouldn't say it's that. Would you say the omega-3 is a good way to go?
I think it's one. So you understand how really. Let's see if I can answer this question.
I don't
depends on her age as well.
She's 7. She's nearly 7. I can't bring her down at all. There's nothing I can do that can bring her down. She doesn't talk. She's just constantly in this bubble of negative.
Does she communicate, or is she non-verbal?
No, she communicates, but she can't get that process out. It just doesn't happen.
So she's non-verbal?
No, she's verbal.
Right.
But the processing to actually communicate, it doesn't happen.
I think for me to say, take an omega-3 and it will solve your problem would be very naive.
Right. So you think I need to do a bit more of a deeper dive?
So I think based on the last 45 minutes, there's so many facets to what's going on with someone. Typically when I'm working with someone initially, what I want to know is how many hours of sleep are the kids getting, how many hours are they spending screen time, how many different supplements you're really using with your kids, how many hours of exercise are they getting on a weekly basis, how many meltdowns are they having at school, how many social aspects are they doing, what's their wins for the week, what things are they achieving, what are they doing well, because I actually also like to focus on what they're doing well, not what they're just doing badly, because actually reinforce good behaviour actually. Have you ever heard of the Skinner's rat scenario? So they basically put a rat in a cage, and if it didn't do what you wanted it to do, they shocked it, right? But if they did do what he wanted it to do, they gave it a reward. What they basically found is the rat's behaviour started improving more when they rewarded it than when they traumatised it.
See, my son's the complete opposite. So at school, if you say to him, "Oh my God, Rex, that work is amazing," he'll rip it up.
He's literally like,
He'll rip it up. No, it's good. They've said it's good.
There's always going to be an exception.
So I did try it at home. I was like, "Oh, well, maybe you could try a little bit better." My mum said it's rubbish. My mum said it's rubbish.
So you have to traumatize your kid.
There's always an exception. Where I start with everyone, this is where I start, because for me to advise on anything without knowing the kid is to
So
examine
basically
it.
what you're saying is I've got to go through her entire life with her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, but and then the question is how much do you want it to change?
A lot. She's in this constant state of fright and panic.
Yeah. So is how much much work is too much work. So there's a reason why I'm doing this. I don't have to. I'll be honest. I don't have to stand up here on a Saturday afternoon. You come to the practice. You've seen how busy it is in this office, right? So the reality is, I do this because I like helping people. So when do I say that too much work is enough work? Ironically, apparently not, because I'm still stood here now. So where I typically would start with any kid is going through an evaluation with kids and seeing how they're regulated, seeing where I see the interference occurring in their kid, because it's different for every single kid that you see come through the practice. Like how many people think that their two kids are going to be the same in the room? You see 100 kids. You see 100 kids with ADHD. How do they all present? Now the other thing is as well is, by the way, how many people in the room are personally stressed themselves? How do you think that helps for the kids? How many people probably think that they could probably do with taking better care of themselves as well and being more regulated themselves? So the reality is when I start checking parents, guess what? They have as many issues as the kids do. In fact, actually, I think sometimes the parents have more issues than the kids do, and we're bouncing off of each other. So, and that then comes down to the nature-nurture debate as well. So again, there's a lot of, got her book downstairs, Simon and Jennifer, they wrote the book Well-Adjusted Babies, and how the neural development works, and like I was saying, all about the stuff like the proteins, and their book is like literally the Bible of how to look after kids naturally. So like I say, if you want to have a look at it, it's about £40 on Amazon. It's called Well-Adjusted Babies. They've got literally everything from how to reduce toxins in their lifestyle, reducing stuff like plastics, types of supplementations, food, even pre-postnatal, what can happen during birthing process, post-birthing process, all of this stuff, and it's written in a way that you guys can understand. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read. But do you want to know how big it is? It's a lot of information, right? So what I've tried to do is digest that down into 45 minutes. So, like I said, there are 3 ways that we can physically affect brain. Like I said, chemically, emotionally. When we start looking at kids with emotion, how many of them struggle with school? Regulating at school is hard work, because guess what? How many things have they got to try and regulate between them and school? There's a lot of stuff that they're trying to regulate between them and school. So look, my job is not to say that I treat ADHD. My job is to say that there are options where we can start looking at how can we manage these things naturally. I'm not saying that if I start adjusting your kids, their ADHD is going to disappear. What I'm saying is that if a kid's brain is regulating better, they should be able to cope with stress better. So is it fair to say that I can't say that I treat ADHD, right? What we can do is manage some of the symptoms. Like I've worked with people with Parkinson's, I've worked with people with MS, I've worked with people, do I treat those conditions? No. But the guy that I used to see with Parkinson's that used to fall over every time he got on the bus and stop falling when he when he was getting on the bus, do you think that was a bit of a win for him? He didn't treat his Parkinson's, but he stopped falling over. In the same sense that obviously Zachary stopped banging his head against the wall. I think his mum's pretty pleased with that one. So, look, this is obviously an overview. I'm going to hang around and answer obviously questions, but what I would normally do with kids, like I say, what I normally get people to do is fill out a weekly chart to tell me what areas that I think potentially maybe that kid is struggling with, so that we can then start to identify areas of potentially how we support that child's neural development. That, I assume, hopefully makes sense to people. So what we want to do is just see, like I say, are they eating well? Can we record on that? Are they drinking enough? Can we record on that? Are they sleeping for 8 hours a night? Can we record on that? Are they doing, so then when we start then trying to regulate their nervous system, if 3 weeks in we all of a sudden see that they were sleeping 6 hours and they're sleeping 8 hours, have we seen a difference even if they're still having freak outs? Are we potentially on the right tracks if they're starting to sleep a little bit more? If they're having one less meltdown this week and then one less meltdown the week after, and one, because by the way, do you think that these processes are going to be fast or slow?
Slow.
Oh, thank Christ for that. So the reality is on tissue healing time, right? So when we look at brain development, does anybody know how fast nerves heal? Slow. If you have a nerve pain running down your arm, it takes roughly 9 to 12 months. If you have a disc injury in your spine, it can take up to 24 months for a disc to repair, right? So if we're looking at brain development, where there is 1,000 trillion connections in your brain and central nervous system, is it fair to say that it might take a little bit of time for the brain to reorganise? So if, and don't feel like you have to, but if you want me to check, by the way, you or your kids, we do have an option for it. Is it okay if I just explain what we would do if we did an examination? So like I say, we obviously get you to fill out the chart, if that's okay, because personally I want to try and get an idea of what's going on pre the session. 2, we would obviously go through a formal history with you. All right, obviously bring the kids down. Probably going to have real fun. Trying to take a history whilst we've got a little terror tearing up my room. But I'm kind of used to it now. We've had a few broken things. There's loads of fragile things, but we've broken things in the room before, and it's okay. Everything in my room is replaceable, right? We would then go through a physical exam. So we look at stuff like their coordination, we look at things like their posture. We also do a lot of muscle testing. Now this is quite interesting with kids because I have to use the parents to help with this because most kids don't listen to me, especially to start off with. So once we've obviously gone through a full physical exam. Now obviously if I was checking an adult, because by the way, if you're as stressed as your kids, guess what? It's going to come off on them. If we're checking adults, we do X-ray on site as well. So if you guys are regulating better, guess what? You're better able to deal with the kids. If the kids are better regulated, yeah. Okay. So